My name is Robert, and I've always been a simple guy with simple pleasures, lifting weights, playing football, drinking beer with the team after practice. I'm a senior at State University on a full athletic scholarship, majoring in kinesiology because it seemed like the most straightforward path from college athletics to either professional sports or coaching. I never expected my predictable world to be turned upside down by a skinny art stage to see things the rest of us missed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when Thomas first approached me. I was finishing up my workout in the campus gym doing my final set of bench presses when I noticed someone watching me from across the weight room. He was tall and lean, all sharp angles and nervous energy, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and clothes that were somehow both carefully chosen and deliberately disheveled. He didn't look like he'd been running, looked like he'd been deliberately disheveled. He didn't look like he'd been never in by mistake, and was too polite to leave. After I finished my set and started wiping down the equipment, he walked over. Up close, I could see he had striking green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and there were smudges of what looked like charcoal on his hands. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soft but clear. "Are you Robert Martinez? From the football team?" "Yeah, that's me." I grabbed my water bottle, studying him. "Do I know you?" "I'm Thomas Chen. I'm an art student." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly nervous. "I was wondering if I could talk to you about something. It might sound strange." I shrugged. "Shoot. I'm working on a series of figure studies for my senior thesis, Human Anatomy, specifically focusing on athletic physiques. I've been watching you work out, and—" He paused, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I was wondering if you'd consider modeling for me." I nearly choked on my water. "Modeling. Figure drawing," he clarified quickly. "It's completely professional. I'm studying the way muscles work, how the body moves. You have an ideal athletic build for what I'm trying to capture." "Like clothed modeling?" I asked, though something in his expression told me that wasn't what he meant. Thomas's blush deepened. "Actually, it would need to be nude modeling. I know that sounds weird, but it's standard for figure studies. I'd pay you, of course, $50 an hour, and sessions would probably be 2 to 3 hours each." I stared at him, trying to process what he was asking. "You want me to pose naked for you to draw?" "I understand if you're not comfortable with that," he said quickly. "It's just that you have exactly the kind of muscular definition I need for this project. The way your shoulders and back work when you lift, your core strength, it's exactly what I've been looking for." There was something in the way he talked about my body that was different from the usual locker room bravado I was used to. It wasn't sexual or objectifying. It was almost clinical, but with an underlying appreciation that felt oddly flattering. "I don't know, man," I said. "I've never done anything like that before." "Think about it," Thomas said, pulling a card from his pocket. "Here's my number. The art building studio is private, completely professional, and like I said, I'd pay you well." I took the card, noting that his hands were trembling slightly. "Why me?" "I mean, there have to be other guys on the team who'd be interested." "I've been observing different athletes for weeks," Thomas said, his nervousness making him speak faster. "You have perfect proportions, ideal muscle definition, and—" He paused, seeming to gather courage. "You move with this unconscious grace that most big guys don't have. It's exactly what I need for my project." After he left, I couldn't stop thinking about his request. $50 an hour was good money, and it's not like I hadn't been naked around other guys plenty of times in locker rooms. But there was something about the way Thomas had looked at me, with an intensity that was both artistic and something else I couldn't quite identify. I called him 3 days later. "Thomas? It's Robert, from the gym." "Oh, hi." I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Have you thought about my offer?" "Yeah, I'll do it, but I have some conditions." "Of course. What do you need?" "Complete privacy, no one else in the studio, and if I get uncomfortable and want to stop, we stop, no questions asked." Absolutely. Those were going to be my conditions, too. We arranged to meet the following Saturday afternoon at his studio in the art building. I spent the week trying not to think about it, but found myself oddly curious about Thomas. I'd never really noticed him on campus before, but now I found myself looking for him in the cafeteria or between classes. When I did spot him, he was usually alone, sketching in a notebook or reading, completely absorbed in his own world. Saturday came faster than I expected. I found Thomas's studio on the third floor of the art building, a large, well-lit space with floor-to-ceiling windows facing north. Canvases were stacked against the walls, and the smell of paint and turpentine filled the air. Thomas was setting up an easel when I arrived, wearing jeans and a paint-stained gray sweater that somehow looked expensive despite the stains. "You came," he said, looking genuinely relieved. "I said I would." I looked around the studio trying to hide my nervousness. "So how does this work?" "There's a changing screen over there." Thomas pointed to a corner of the room. "Take your time getting comfortable. I'll set up the lighting and get my materials ready." Behind the screen, I stripped down to my underwear and then hesitated. This was it, the point of no return. I took a deep breath and removed my boxers, then wrapped the provided robe around myself. When I emerged, Thomas was adjusting a lamp, his back to me. "Ready?" he asked without turning around. "As ready as I'll ever be." He turned, and I saw him swallow hard when he saw me in the robe. "Okay, I'm gonna have you pose on this platform. We'll start with something simple, just standing, maybe with your arms at your sides." I dropped the robe and stepped onto the small platform, hyper-aware of Thomas's eyes on me. But when I looked at his face, I was surprised to see that his expression was completely professional, focused, analytical, almost detached. "Perfect," he murmured, moving around me to study different angles. "Can you turn slightly to the left? And lift your chin just a bit?" For the next 20 minutes, Thomas had me hold the pose while he made quick sketches, occasionally asking me to shift slightly or adjust my position. I was surprised at how natural it felt after the initial awkwardness. Thomas was clearly in his element, completely absorbed in his work, and his professional demeanor made it easier for me to relax. "Let's take a break," he said finally, and I gratefully reached for the robe. "How was that?" I asked, tying the belt around my waist. "Incredible," Thomas said, showing me his sketchpad. "Look at this." I leaned over to see what he'd drawn, and was shocked at what I saw. It was me, but somehow more than me, every muscle defined with perfect accuracy, every line of my body captured with an attention to detail that was almost overwhelming. It was clearly artistic rather than photographic, but it somehow captured something essential about my physicality that I'd never seen before. "Wow," I said, "that's really me?" "That's really you." Thomas was looking at the drawing with satisfaction. "You have an incredible physique, Robert. It's like you were designed to be drawn." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. There was admiration in his voice that went beyond professional appreciation, and when our eyes met, I saw something there that made my stomach flip unexpectedly. "Ready for round 2? He asked, his voice slightly husky. We did 3 more poses that day, sitting, then a more dynamic stance with one arm raised, and finally, a profile view that Thomas said would help him study the line of my back and shoulders. By the end of the session, I was completely comfortable being nude around him, and Thomas had filled several pages of his sketchbook with studies of my body. "This is exactly what I needed," he said as I got dressed behind the screen. "Would you be willing to do this again next week?" "Sure," I said, surprising myself with how quickly I agreed. "Same time?" "Perfect." As I was leaving, Thomas called out, "Robert, thank you. This means more to me than you know." The following week, I found myself looking forward to the session in a way that I didn't want to examine too closely. I told myself it was just about the money, but I knew that wasn't entirely true. There was something about the way Thomas looked at me, the intense focus and appreciation, that was unlike anything I'd experienced before. This time, when I arrived at the studio, Thomas seemed more relaxed, less nervous. He prepared coffee and had music playing softly in the background. "I thought we'd try some more challenging poses today," he said as I changed. "If you're up for it." The poses were indeed more challenging, dynamic positions that required me to hold awkward stances for longer periods. But Thomas was patient, giving me frequent breaks and adjusting his requests based on what was comfortable for me. During one break, as I sat on the edge of the platform in my robe, I found myself really looking at Thomas for the first time. He was attractive in a completely different way from the girls I usually dated, all sharp cheekbones and intense eyes with long fingers that moved gracefully as he worked. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Sure." Thomas looked up from his sketching. "Why art?" I mean, what made you want to do this? Thomas set down his pencil and really looked at me. I've always seen things differently than other people. Colors, shapes, the way light falls on things. Art is the only way I can share what I see with the world. And you see something in me worth drawing? I see a lot in you worth drawing, Thomas said quietly. You have this unconscious confidence in your body, this natural grace. Most people are so disconnected from their physicality, but you inhabit your body completely. It's beautiful. The word beautiful hung in the air between us, and I felt something shift in the dynamic of our relationship. This wasn't just about art anymore, at least not entirely. Thomas, I said carefully, are you gay? He went very still, his face flushing red. Why do you ask? The way you look at me sometimes, the way you talk about my body, it's not just artistic, is it? Thomas was quiet for a long moment, and I thought he might not answer. Then he said very quietly, yes, I'm gay, but that's not why I asked you to model for me, Robert. I really do need these drawings for my thesis. But you're attracted to me. Yes, he said simply, but I would never let that interfere with our professional relationship. If it makes you uncomfortable, I understand if you want to stop. I studied his face, noting the vulnerability there, the fear that I might react badly or walk away. It doesn't make me uncomfortable, I said finally. I just wanted to understand. Relief flooded Thomas's features. Really? Really? But I have to ask, is this the first time you've been attracted to someone you're drawing? Thomas smiled for the first time that day. No, but it's the first time I've been this attracted to someone I'm drawing. Something warm unfurled in my chest at his admission. What does that mean? It means, Thomas said, setting aside his sketchbook and moving closer to where I sat, that I spend way too much time thinking about you when you're not here. It means that drawing you is both the easiest and hardest thing I've ever done, because I want to capture every detail, but I also get distracted by how much I want to touch you. His honesty was disarming, and I found myself leaning closer to him without conscious thought. Thomas. I know you're straight, he said quickly. I'm not trying to seduce you or anything, I thought you should know where I stand. What makes you think I'm straight? I asked, surprising both of us. Thomas blinked, aren't you? I mean, you play football, you're in a fraternity. So gay guys can't play football? No, that's not what I meant. Thomas was flustered now, his carefully controlled composure cracking. I just assumed. I've dated girls, I said slowly, but I've never felt about any of them the way I've been feeling about you these past couple of weeks. Thomas went very still. How have you been feeling about me? Instead of answering with words, I reached out and cupped his face in my hand, running my thumb along his sharp cheekbone, like I want to know what it would feel like to kiss you. Thomas's breath caught. Robert. Is that okay? I asked. In response, Thomas leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but when I didn't pull away, it deepened. Thomas tasted like coffee and something uniquely him, and the feeling of his mouth moving against mine sent heat shooting through my entire body. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I started. Yeah, Thomas agreed. So what happens now? I asked. Thomas smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Now we figure it out as we go. Over the next few weeks, our modeling sessions became something more. Thomas would still draw me, but the sessions were punctuated by conversations, by slowly building intimacy, by kisses that grew more confident with each meeting. I learned that Thomas was from San Francisco, that he'd known he was gay since he was 12, that he'd never had a serious relationship because he'd never met anyone who understood both his art and his intensity. He learned that I'd grown up in a small town in Texas, that football had been my identity for so long I'd never questioned what else I might want, that being with him felt like discovering a part of myself I'd never known exists. You're different than I expected, Thomas told me one afternoon as we lay tangled together on the futon in his studio, both of us still catching our breath. Different how? Gentler, more thoughtful, the way you are on the field, all that aggression and power. I thought that's how you'd be all the time. And how am I? Thomas traced patterns on my chest with his finger. Careful with me, patient, like you understand that I'm not used to being touched by someone your size. It was true, with Thomas I found myself being more conscious of my strength, more aware of the contrast between his lean frame and my bulk, but rather than feeling limiting, it felt like a new way of being present in my body. "I've never been with a guy before," I told him. "I don't know what I'm doing half the time." "You're doing fine," Thomas assured me, "more than fine." The relationship between us developed slowly, carefully. Thomas introduced me to his world: art galleries, independent films, coffee shops where people discussed philosophy and poetry. I introduced him to mind football games, weight training, the simple pleasure of pushing your body to its limits. "I never understood the appeal of sports," Thomas told me as he watched me work out one evening. "But seeing you move, seeing how much thought and strategy goes into what looks like pure physicality, I get it now." "And I never understood art," I replied. "I thought it was just pretty pictures. But watching you work, seeing how you translate what you see into something others can feel, it's like you're speaking a language I never knew existed." Our differences, which should have been obstacles, became the things we most appreciated about each other. Thomas taught me to see beauty in unexpected places, to slow down and notice details I'd been rushing past my entire life. I taught him that physicality could be a form of expression too, that there was art in the way a body moved through space. The hardest part was navigating our different social circles. My teammates were accepting but confused. They'd never seen me with anyone like Thomas before. Thomas's artist friends were protective, worried that I was some kind of experiment or phase. "They think you're going to break my heart," Thomas told me after a particularly awkward dinner with his friends. "Are they right?" I asked. "I don't know," Thomas said honestly. "Are you?" It was the question neither of us wanted to face. What were we to each other? Where was this going? I was a senior with NFL aspirations. Thomas was planning to move to New York after graduation to pursue his art career. The answer came during our last modeling session of the semester. Thomas had been working on a large canvas, not just sketches this time, but a full painting of me in one of the dynamic poses we'd developed. When he showed it to me, finished, I was speechless. It was me, but elevated, idealized without being unrealistic. Every muscle was perfectly rendered, but more than that, Thomas had somehow captured something in my expression, in the way I held myself, that spoke to strength and vulnerability simultaneously. "It's incredible," I said finally. "It's you," Thomas replied, "or at least, it's how I see you." Looking at that painting, I realized that Thomas saw me more clearly than I'd ever seen myself. And more importantly, I realized that what I felt for him wasn't just attraction or curiosity, it was love. "Thomas," I said, turning to face him, "I love you." His face lit up like I'd just given him the greatest gift in the world. "I love you too." "So what do we do about that?" Thomas took my hands in his paint-stained ones. "We make it work. I don't know how yet, but we make it work." 6 months later, I was drafted by a team in California, just a few hours from where Thomas had gotten into graduate school. It wasn't the NFL, but it was professional football, and it was close enough to Thomas that we could build something real together. Looking back, I realized that Thomas didn't just draw my body during those sessions. He drew out parts of me I never knew existed. He taught me that strength comes in many forms, that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that love can happen in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, late at night in the apartment we now share, I watch Thomas work on his paintings, and remember that first day in the gym, when a nervous art student approached a jock and asked him to pose naked. It was the most important question anyone has ever asked me, even though neither of us knew it at the time. Sometimes the best things in life come from saying yes to the unexpected, from letting someone see you in ways you've never been seen before. Thomas taught me that being truly naked isn't just about taking off your clothes, it's about letting someone see your soul.